And finally, for this session, I now introduce Arthur Sinodinos, whom I'm sure actually needs no introduction. He's certainly been a driving force behind this country's development for many, many years. But for the sake of formality today, let me share that Arthur is here as Liberal Senator of New South Wales and Chairman of the Coalition Deregulation Task Force. Sorry, Arthur, your views. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adi, and it's great to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I suppose if I had any gratuitous advice to offer on this particular topic, particularly in the context of the work that Ken's doing on this white paper, it is that we do use this white paper and the exercises associated with it to really entrench a global mindset in our community. We still have a lot of work to do around this. There is a real divergence, I think, between the views of people in opinion-making circles and senior business circles and the community as a whole. I've been in Orange and Bathurst the first couple of days of this week and doing deregulation work, and I was mainly wanting to talk about red tape. They wanted to talk about Coles and Woolies and the impact that was having at the farm gate, and they wanted to talk about foreign investment and the concern they had about who was buying the land and what were they going to use it for and what value would we get out of foreigners, and they were particularly in this case mentioning the Chinese. What value do we get out of that investment? And it just reminded me that exercises like the white paper are an opportunity to keep reminding people of the success of what we've done in reforming and opening the economy and the need to keep that process going. Mark talked before about competitive advantage. I mean, we need to keep creating and recreating our competitive advantage. And yes, part of our advantage is based on our resource endowments, but it's also based on what we do in terms of our education, the way we fashion our infrastructure. It's got to do with the way we even model our cities and create interesting cities, places that are artistic and creative, because we need global cities. We need cities where decision-making about where to locate economic activity happens. We don't want to get to a situation where we have a branch office mentality in this country, where the decisions are made for us elsewhere. We've got to create sustainable competitive advantage. It means continuing the journey in terms of entrenching competition throughout the economy and the various factor markets, including the labour market. We have to have a sense of urgency because today our comparators are not the US, the UK or Europe. They're in Asia, they're in Africa, they're in Latin America. Look at what the ambassador of Brazil was talking about before. Look at the growth of what are now called the E7, which is the BRICS plus other emerging economies like Turkey, etc. There's tremendous growth going on. These countries are not standing still. We've got a window of opportunity, and part of it is based on what we do in mining, of course. But the window of opportunity, I was reminded again this morning, is that we have this wave of mining coming through. We've got a wave of agricultural investment and a boom off the back of that in terms of the growth of demand for food, particularly more sophisticated food products. And then there's a whole range of goods and services coming out of the growth of the Indian and Chinese middle class. So for us, there's an ongoing competitive challenge, and it's how we make sure that risk-taking, entrepreneurship and innovation are really entrenched in the economy. Competition is part of the solution. Part of the solution too is how we better harvest the tremendous amount of research we do in the public sector, whether it's in our universities, I'll classify them as public sector for this particular case, and the amount that's done in CSIRO and elsewhere. Yes, we patent some of that, but the rates of patenting in our public sector are woefully behind countries overseas, particularly the US. And this is not a plea to say that we should keep all innovation in Australia. Of course we've got to share our innovations with the world. Not everything can be developed here, but there's a lot of good stuff here that can be developed. And linked with that is the whole debate that seems to recur every so often around how we develop our venture capital industry to provide genuine capital and help for our startups. There is a lot more interest in that area, particularly from American firms in Australia, particularly in recent times. But the fact of the matter is that you look at countries of a similar size in a sense, or we're slightly larger actually than Israel, but look at Israel. Look at the success they've had. Bill Shorten's off on a mission at the moment with a group of business people to look further at that experience. How do we distill that venture capital experience? What are the bottlenecks? We've tried a number of times to do something about that. How do we get better at that? Because that's all part of how we create more of an innovation experience within Australia. I think it's very important to come back to a point that I think a number of speakers made this morning and Mark reiterated about language and culture and understanding. This is not about us somehow becoming more Asian or saying, well, why should we learn about them? They should learn about us. Rather, it's how do you create a competitive advantage? Well, you put yourself in the shoes of the customer, and they are the customer. And you try and go that mile, that further. You go that extra mile and understand them, almost better than they understand themselves. Get inside their heads. And to do that, we've actually got to encourage our kids to do language and do more about foreign cultures at school. It may sound a bit unfashionable to say it that way. I don't want to go as far as to advocate we should actually make it compulsory, but we should look at how we really encourage language acquisition and retention. And it doesn't have to be just Asian languages. It's how we help to entrench the global mindset that I talked about earlier on. And I'll finish on this bit. The only other bit is that governments always have a role to play, but even when it's providing assistance, it's got to be with the grain of market forces. So when we see the potential for attractive clusters of industries that can also help to attract foreign capital and the like, we've got to see how governments facilitate that process, but always in a way which is not picking winners, but which is actually, I think, going with where the market ultimately is going to go. And that's why you also require people in government to be better able to benchmark what they're doing against what the private sector is doing and what people overseas are doing. We need more of that interchange between the public and the private sectors. We don't have enough of that still in Australia. On that point, I think I'll finish.
All right, well, unfortunately, we're in a precarious position again where we've run out of time for Q&A, so unfortunately, we won't be able to do that right now, but if you do have questions for specific speakers, please, I do encourage you to catch up with them when we break or even later today. So would you please all join me in thanking this panel? Thank you.